Hey there guys, Penobi here, bringing you another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. This is going to be a profile on Nurse Burn, or whatever you want to call it, a deck focusing on cards like Nurse Replicule, the Fallen One, also Battery Reaction to Samuchi, Gift Card, etc. Basically, the point of this deck, sorry for the glare, is whenever your opponent's life points increase, they decrease instead. It's a really old school deck idea, really old school deck type. Not really seen much anymore, especially considering that Nurse Replicule was only a video game promo, a single time release, so you don't see her very often at all. But again, 2014, new year, new format, decided to go ahead and post some under the radar decks that I think are really fun and actually pretty successful. I've been having a lot of fun and success with this deck. Not quite as much at the highest tier. Things like Fire Fist, etc. can be annoying to deal with. But a lot of decks still have trouble with this, especially with the really heavy back row. Decks that don't have a lot of organic outlets to heavy back row decks really have trouble facing what this deck has. So anyway, sorry to drag on so long. Let's go ahead and get into it. 3 copies of Nurse Replicule, the Fallen One. Whenever your opponent's life points increase, they would decrease instead. 2 copies of Card Card D. Card Card D definitely made this deck a lot better. The fact that it has a way to go positive is awesome. Which, every deck should have at least some sort of way to do that based on whatever its strengths and weaknesses are. This deck has the strength of a lot of back row, so you don't really have to fear not having too many normal summons. Then you have your next practically win condition, 2 copies of Stealth Bird. 3 is just too cloggy. You'll see the deck has to run a lot of back row. The deck does have some draw power, some control elements. You don't really need to have multiples of this guy. You set him, flip, 1,000 per turn. You know the deal with that. 2 copies of Lava Golem to get rid of problematic monster cards that just deal with your back row. Problematic monsters in general with pesky effects that are going to go ahead and bypass your defenses. Obviously, he's going to burn them for 1,000 per turn, which is, of course, another way to deal more damage. That's one of the things I love most about this deck, is how it's not very linear at all. It has so many different ways to deal damage. 2 copies of Brainjacker. I know that this card is very left field for most of you. If you don't know what it does, it actually has a really interesting effect. It's an old school flip effect, and whenever it's flip summon, I'm actually going to read it because even I don't know the exact wording. Flip, equip this card to a monster on your opponent's side of the field and treat it as an equipped card. Take control of the monster that is equipped with this card. Increase your opponent's life points by 500 during each of his or her standby phases. So basically, it's similar to a snatch deal in a way. Keep in mind, though, that he does have to be alive to resolve his effect. So no, they can't just attack into it and then you steal their monster and he becomes an equip card. You would have to flip him up manually yourself. That's the ruling for this card. Obviously, he has to be alive to resolve his effect. So really good card still. If you have the back row to protect him, which this deck definitely does. So you flip him face up, you take one of their monsters, you keep it indefinitely, and they gain 500 during each of their standby phases, which if you have a Replicule or a bad reaction, they're losing 500. So all around, good card. Then the last monster card for the deck is going to be Blast Sphere. Only 1 copy of Blast Sphere. It's kind of a one-trick pony. Really old school card. If you don't remember what it does, whenever it's destroyed by battle while it was face-down defense, it becomes an equipped card to your opponent's monster, and then during their next standby phase, their monster is destroyed and they lose life points. Obviously, with how much synchroing and XYZing and all that kind of stuff that goes on nowadays, Blast Sphere is a bit of a liability. It's not too consistent, reliable, etc. But having 1 copy, I think, is good. It does catch people off guard if they attack it with one of their bigger boss monsters. That's going to put a huge dent into their life points. Going into the spell cards, obviously that's a very low monster count because you have, let's see, 1 copy of Allure of Darkness. Obvious, you're running 7 or 8 targets, I think. 3 copies of Duality. You want to make sure that you get into your Nurse Replicule the Fallen Ones. You don't have any sort of way to search it. You want to make sure that you're getting the right, I'm not going to say combo pieces, but the right back row to protect you from the right situations. You want to get into your Card Card Ds to get that plus off early. And then we have 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin is pretty much the best card in the deck because it lets you play a 37 card deck. It lets you obviously draw the card. And you're also going to be burning your opponent for 1,000 while you use it. Really obviously OP in this deck. 3 copies of Soul Taker, some good old-fashioned, old-school 1-for-1 destruction. Gets that good old-fashioned smashing ground feel that we all used to know and love, but it still gives you the added effect of burning your opponent for 1,000 damage. 3 copies of Messenger of Peace. I love Messenger of Peace. I've really always loved this card in these like slower, not necessarily burn decks. Obviously this is a burn deck, but just in a lot of old school decks that utilize field control, need to slow down the pace of the game. I think the Messenger of Peace is the right way to do it. Obviously cards like Gravity Bind, Level Limit, Area B, the things we all used to turn to are no longer viable because of XYZ playing Exceeds. But Messenger of Peace, 1400 attack monsters and lower are the only ones that are able to attack, which means that they can't overpass the 1700 defense of Stealth Bird, which obviously makes it good for this deck. The fact that Nurse Reficule is 1400 attack means that they can't attack over it. The best that they can do is ram. So overall, it just works really well with the stat points of the monsters you're playing. And of course, with Lava Golem, making them unable to attack is really beneficial. Next, let's go into the staple traps. You're running a lot of trap cards. 1 copy of Solemn Warning, 1 copy of Compulse, 1 copy of Torrential. These are basically your kind of staple trap cards. Torrential is kind of iffy depending on the deck that you're running and how much field control you have. But obviously, as you saw, there's not a whole lot of monsters in this deck. And you're going to be playing things like Card D. You're going to have a blank field. Torrential is obviously really good. 2 copies of Fiendish Chain just to stop those annoying monsters that are going to mess up your board. Mess up those effects. Obviously, stopping attacks can be useful as well. 2 copies of Mirror Force. I'm really liking 2 copies of Mirror Force in a lot of decks this format. Honestly, I can't completely put my finger on what makes me like Mirror Force so much more than I used to, because I really did not like it too much before. I think it's just the fact that Synchroing is less popular, Stardust is less popular, which is obviously a huge counter to Mirror Force. And I think the fact that things like Heavy obviously being gone, the more static, I'm going to call them static trap cards, cards that are not chainable, are just more viable in this format than some formats past. Then more attack negation. This deck runs a lot of attack hate. 2 copies of Scrap Iron Scarecrow. I love Scrap Iron Scarecrow. I used to always love this card. I think it's become better seen in the eyes of the public ever since that Madolche player topped main decking it, even though it was kind of an odd card count for him as well. And it's just become more well respected, which I'm really glad because I really love that card. 2 copies of Magic Cylinder. Going old school with this one. Magic Cylinder really good for this deck because let's say you summon a Lava Golem to their side of the field and they attack your face down Stealth Bird with it. You Magic Cylinder that. The next turn you flip. That's half their life points gone right there. You do an Upstart or a Soul Taker into a gift card and you've got game right there. Really, this deck can come out of nowhere, really left field with the Sucker Punches, and Magic Cylinder just adds to that really fun feel of being able to shock the hell out of your opponent with those kind of plays. And of course, it's good. It protects your monsters, etc., etc. 3 copies of gift card, the Beast himself. Increase your opponent's life points by 3,000, which of course with that Nurse Reficule, with that bad reaction to Simochi, is going to be 3k damage. And the last trap card of the deck, 1 copy of bad reaction to Simochi, only 1 copy. Definitely don't want to get your hands cloggy, definitely don't want to make it so you don't have the resources to defend against what your opponent's going to be going for. You can't really afford to play more than that, and you really are going to be drawing into your Nurse Reficules. With, keep in mind, Upstart makes it practically a 37 card deck, triple duality, 2 card D. So you will be drawing into cards, you have the Allure. So don't be too afraid to only run the 1 copy. But yeah, overall, that's the deck, guys. Hope that you really enjoy. I think it is really fun. It's, like I said, very under the radar. I think it definitely has potential to do things this format in terms of the less top tier plays. I wouldn't necessarily take it to a regionals or anything like that, but at locals, definitely feel free to run it. It's a fun deck. So hopefully you guys enjoy. I'm going to go ahead and post a DN pick in the description, so if you want to refer to the list for later. And as far as the side and extra deck go, obviously run MSTs for things like Decree, run Cowboy, even though the only real level 4s you have are going to be the Reficule. You can still go into Cowboy. I actually have gone into Cowboy for game before, even though I'm hardly running any monsters. But anyways, that's the deck. Hopefully you guys have a nice day. I'm not going to let this video drag too long. Take care, and catch you next time.